Hey, what's up everybody? It is me, Dan, moderately anonymous MTG, here to make some more of the greatest cEDH content in the multiverse right before your eyes, and do my favorite thing at the same time, which is talk shit. Specifically, I want to talk about the One Ring and how I think that this card is going to change the way that we play cEDH for a while. I know I said this about Orcish Bowmasters, but I think honestly the entire cEDH community was a little bit too hot on Orcish Bowmasters, and we all kind of overlooked the One Ring, but I sincerely think that this is going to change the way that we play Magic. Now, of course, just to read it out, just so we all remember what it does, the One Ring is a 4-mana legendary artifact. It is indestructible and says when the One Ring enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on the One Ring. And it has an ability to tap it, put a burden counter on the One Ring, then draw a card for each burden counter on the One Ring. So it's an incremental draw engine. It gives you protection from everything until your next turn, which I think looks like flavor text, and I think that's probably why it got undervalued a lot. We just saw the incremental draw engine of it. That's what I was thinking about at least. But every one of these lines of text adds up to this being a really, really strong artifact. So first, before we really jump into this, I want to talk about the reasons why I have really come around on the One Ring. First and foremost, it's because it's immediately seeing a ton of Eternal play, which is the sign of a really good card usually. This has immediately been adopted into Modern, into Legacy, and even into Vintage as a 4-of in decks. Now, whether or not it remains a 4-of in all of those decks is a total other issue. I think in Vintage, people probably go down on a little bit, but if you're playing a new card, you want to play 4 copies so you can see it, really test it, and see how good it actually is. But it's incredibly powerful, it works great in multiples, and people are already talking about it being banned in Eternal formats, which normally I don't put a lot of weight into. I think that the average person really has no idea what goes into banning a card in either EDH or in Eternal formats. But honestly, it's one of those cards where it's like Oko. It's coming up so often. It's a great thing to put in any of your decks. And the thing that's really crucial about this is that you don't have to splash in different colors like you did with Oko. This is just a thing that you can just generically put in any deck, draw a bunch of cards, and it's absolutely amazing. This is something that I saw G-Toast messing with at first. He immediately really liked it, likes the card advantage. He was already playing a Manifold Key in his Godo deck anyway and decided to put in a second copy to start using it with the One Ring, and immediately his reports about using it were really good. He was drawing a bunch of cards, it was really helping him power through turns and really adding a lot to his Storm game plan. That immediately got me thinking, wow, I really don't like Ad Nauseam in my Tivit deck. Esper is notoriously not a really great color to play Ad Nauseam in, basically because you don't have access to Dockside Extortionist. Dockside Extortionist is really the thing that pushes you over the top with any hiccups you can have in mana production. It's a really great card, obviously, it's played everywhere. But without it, just using rituals and mana rocks, it can be a lot harder to string together an Ad Nauseam line that wins you the game. Not to mention that it's a really hard thing to cast in Tivit. It really wants you to use your effects like Mana Vault or Grim Monolith on it, but anytime you're using one of those ritual effects on a spell that isn't Tivit, it's kind of a bad time because Tivit is just your best option in the deck. It's an A piece to an A+B combo. It's a gigantic flyer that smacks the shit out of your opponents. It's just obviously a good card and where you want to spend your mana. So Ad Nauseam has always felt a little bit overcosted, a little bit clunky, and really not where I want to be in this control deck that wants to go to turn like 5 or 6. I thought, well, Tivit is already using a bunch of artifact tutors. If I had a Manifold Key in my deck, it wouldn't be bad. I don't mind untapping Mana Vault or Grim Monolith. I don't mind making Tivit unblockable. That's actually a really crucial part of Tivit's game plan, is being able to get through. If anyone's got a little chump blocker in the air, it makes it a lot harder to get through. This can solve that problem. And most importantly, you're an Esper control deck. You want to keep your hand stocked full of cards and full of answers for people, as well as finding your own combo pieces. So I started testing it in Tivit, and every time I came up, the card was just cracked. To just quickly go over the math of how it works, you get 1 card on your first activation, you've drawn 3 cards by the time you're tapping it on turn 2. By the time you're tapping it on your 3rd turn, you're drawing up to 6 cards, and then on your next turn, you're going to tap it again, and you're drawing up to 10 extra cards. The amount of card advantage that it gives you is really huge. Obviously, it's not on the same level as Ad Nauseam. The greatest advantage to Ad Nauseam is that it's instant speed, and then it draws you a huge amount of cards. All of our decks basically are built to run Ad Nauseam. They'll have extremely low average CMCs. So Ad Nauseam is built to draw you between 20 and 30 cards. That's a rate that the One Ring really can't keep up with. If you need 20 to 30 cards in your hand, the One Ring is not a replacement for it at all. I don't think that the One Ring is a replacement for Ad Nauseam in general, but the point I want to make is that I think it's a great adoption for decks that aren't really great Ad Nauseam decks. And obviously, it doesn't stop there. This isn't just a great card for decks that were using Ad Nauseam poorly. This is amazing for decks who have never had access to a card like Ad Nauseam before. Just about any Sans Black deck is looking for more ways to keep their hand stocked. We see people on cards like Archivist of Ogma, which in general don't really do anything in particular for their game plan. They simply are there to draw cards. Well, of course, the One Ring also only draws cards. It doesn't block anything. It can't attack anybody. The other benefits from having it around are extremely potent. The card draw from the One Ring gets incrementally larger every turn, And that protection can actually be super crucial. There are a lot of ways that we can lose the game to damage, and while it doesn't seem like the most common aspect of the game, we're usually thinking about Fastest Oracle and Underworld Breach combos as the most common ways of winning. There are a ton of ways that decks win by dealing you combat damage, and being able to avoid combat damage while you're setting up and making bigger plays is also a really good thing. If you think about something like a Rakdos Storm deck that's trying to win with Dualcaster Mage and Twin Flame, it stops that. It stops Nagila attacks, which is really important. It stops big swings from Winota. If you've got any Jessica Ishai players in your local pod, it can stop you from the huge tripled Ishai damage, which is really hot. There's a lot of ways that protection comes into play that is actually really clutch. So even though it might just look like flavor text, it's actually a really potent part of the card as well. Like I said before, I don't expect every non-dedicated Nautilus to start dropping Ad Nauseam and playing this instead, but I do think that we're going to see a huge amount of decks take up this draw engine for the first time, and maybe even replace it. I've talked to a Timna and Crom player who said that they were going to replace Ad Nauseam with the One Ring in their deck, because it's more of a control deck, like I said with Tivit. And I think for control decks, for decks that don't have access to a card like this previously, this is a really strong addition to your arsenal of tools. If you're playing an artifact heavy deck already, this is something that you really want. If you're playing a low color count deck, this is something that you really want. And I think that as time goes on, we're going to see a lot more people than they expected are going to actually really want to try this out in their decks. I'm already having a lot of success with it. I'd love to hear if any of y'all are having success with it in the comments. I've seen some videos floating around the internet of people using the One Ring to great success. Check out the video link above to go to a Mental Misplay video where we get to see Scoopface, friend of the show, really whoop ass with the One Ring. And thank y'all so much for watching. I know this was a quick one, but this is a card that I'm really excited about. I think it's going to be a really exciting part of the new meta. So yeah, tell me what you think in the comments, and we will see you next time, everybody.